In a quaint little village surrounded by lush green hills and vibrant fields, life unfolded in its simplest form. The air was always fresh, carrying the scent of wildflowers and freshly baked bread from the local bakery. People knew each other by name, greeted one another warmly, and lived harmoniously without much fuss. It was the kind of place where time seemed to move slower, almost as if it wanted everyone to savor every moment. One crisp autumn morning, when golden leaves danced in the breeze and the sun cast a soft glow over the landscape, something unusual happened. A convoy of military vehicles rolled into the village, their presence immediately drawing attention. Villagers paused what they were doing. Some stopped sweeping their doorsteps. Others set down their baskets of vegetables and turned to watch curiously. Soldiers stepped out of the trucks, dressed in sharp uniforms that stood out against the rustic charm of the village. Their polished boots clicked against the cobblestone streets, creating an unfamiliar rhythm in a place more accustomed to the sound of birds chirping or children laughing. The villagers exchanged puzzled glances. What could bring soldiers to such a peaceful, quiet corner of the world? Rumors began swirling almost instantly. Some thought there might be trouble nearby, a natural disaster, or perhaps even a security threat. Others wondered if the soldiers were simply lost, but no one dared approach them directly. Instead, they observed from a distance, their curiosity growing with each passing minute. Lieutenant Mark DuPont, the leader of the group, noticed the wary looks and decided to break the ice. He walked toward a group of elderly men sitting on a bench near the town square, smoking pipes and chatting idly. With a polite smile, he introduced himself and explained that his team was conducting routine training exercises in the area. His calm demeanor and respectful tone put the men at ease, and soon enough, word spread throughout the village that the soldiers meant no harm. Despite the reassurance, the villagers couldn't shake off their intrigue. There was something different about these soldiers. They didn't act like outsiders passing through. They carried themselves with discipline but also warmth, as though they genuinely cared about the people around them. Children, who had initially been shy, started inching closer, fascinated by the shiny badges on the soldiers' uniforms and the sturdy rifles slung across their shoulders. One brave boy even asked if he could touch the helmet of a soldier standing nearby. The soldier chuckled softly and knelt down, letting the child examine it closely. As the day wore on, the soldiers set up temporary barracks on the outskirts of the village, near the edge of the forest. From there, they went about their duties efficiently, yet they made sure to acknowledge the villagers whenever their paths crossed. A nod here, a wave there. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make the townsfolk feel seen and respected. By evening, the initial unease had melted away, replaced by cautious curiosity. Mothers invited the soldiers to join them for dinner, offering hearty stews and warm bread. Farmers offered fresh produce, insisting the soldiers take whatever they needed. Even the usually reserved blacksmith cracked a rare smile when a young recruit complimented his craftsmanship. Slowly but surely, barriers began to fall, paving the way for unexpected connections. Little did anyone know, this visit would become far more meaningful than anyone anticipated. For now, though, the soldiers remained enigmatic figures, their true purpose hidden beneath layers of professionalism and camaraderie. Yet, as twilight settled over the village and the stars began to twinkle above, one thing was certain. Something extraordinary was about to unfold. The soldiers had explained their official reason for being in the village, to conduct routine training exercises, but there was an unspoken air of mystery surrounding them. While they carried out their duties with precision and discipline, it was clear that something deeper was at play. Lieutenant Mark DuPont, in particular, seemed to carry a weight on his shoulders, though he masked it well behind his composed demeanor. His fellow soldiers noticed how his gaze lingered a little longer on certain landmarks: the old church steeple, the weathered schoolhouse, the bakery with its faded sign, and they began to suspect that this visit wasn't just about military drills. Unbeknownst to the villagers, Mark had grown up in this very town before enlisting in the army. As a boy, he'd roamed these streets barefoot, chasing friends through fields of wildflowers and dreaming of adventures beyond the horizon. But life had taken him far from home, and over the years, he'd rarely returned. The demands of service, coupled with the emotional distance that came with growing older, had kept him away. Still, the memories of his childhood here remained vivid, almost haunting. He remembered the laughter echoing through the village square, the smell of Madame Leclerc's freshly baked bread, and the way the sun dipped below the hills every evening, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. For Mark, coming back felt like stepping into a time capsule. Everything looked both familiar and foreign at the same time. The cobblestone streets were the same, but cracks now ran through some of the stones. The schoolhouse where he'd learned his first lessons still stood, though its paint was peeling. And yet, despite the changes, the essence of the place, the warmth, the simplicity, the sense of belonging, remained unchanged. It tugged at his heartstrings in ways he hadn't anticipated. His comrades picked up on his quiet nostalgia. During breaks between exercises, they often found him gazing off into the distance, lost in thought. When pressed, Mark shared snippets of his past. How he used to help his father tend to their small farm, how he'd sneak treats from the bakery when no one was looking, how he once dreamed of becoming a soldier to make his family proud. His stories painted a picture of a boy who loved deeply and yearned for greatness, a boy who had grown into a man carrying the weight of responsibility. But there was more to Mark's return than sentimentality. Beneath his calm exterior lay a desire to reconcile with his past. He hadn't left the village on the best terms all those years ago. His decision to join the military had been met with mixed reactions. Some, like his parents, supported his ambition, while others questioned why he'd want to leave such a peaceful life behind. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and eventually, silence. Over time, letters stopped arriving. Phone calls became infrequent, and the connection he once cherished began to fade. Now, standing in the shadow of his former home, Mark wondered if he could mend what had been broken. Could he face the people he'd left behind? Would they welcome him with open arms or turn him away? These questions gnawed at him, even as he tried to focus on his mission. He knew he couldn't dwell on the past forever, but he also couldn't ignore it. This visit was his chance to find closure, not just for himself, but for the people who had shaped him into the man he was today. As the days passed, Mark's presence began to stir subtle ripples in the village. Word spread quietly among the townsfolk that the lieutenant was one of their own. Eyes followed him wherever he went, not out of suspicion, but curiosity. They saw glimpses of the boy he used to be in the way he smiled at children or greeted elders with respect. Slowly, the villagers started piecing together the truth. This wasn't just another soldier passing through. It was Mark, their Mark, who had come back after all these years. Though no one said it aloud, there was a shared understanding that this reunion held significance beyond mere coincidence. Something important was unfolding, and everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest grandparent, felt drawn to it. The stage was set for moments that would touch hearts and remind everyone of the power of forgiveness, connection, and love. Lieutenant Mark DuPont had always been a man of duty, but on the third day of their stay, he decided to take a break from the structured routine of military life. The morning air was crisp, and the sun cast long shadows over the cobblestone streets as he wandered aimlessly through the village. His boots clicked softly against the stones, a sound that felt oddly comforting, like an echo of his childhood. He wasn't sure where he was going or what he was looking for, but something deep inside him pulled him forward. As he turned a corner, the familiar scent of freshly baked bread wafted toward him, stopping him in his tracks. It was a smell he hadn't realized he'd missed until that very moment. Following the aroma, he found himself standing outside the same bakery he used to visit as a boy. The sign above the door was faded now, its letters barely legible, but the warmth radiating from within was unchanged. Through the window, he could see Madame Leclerc, her silver hair tied neatly in a bun, kneading dough with practiced hands. She looked older, of course, but her movements were as steady and graceful as ever. Mark hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should go inside. What would she say? Would she even remember him? Before he could talk himself out of it, the bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped in. The warmth of the bakery enveloped him immediately, wrapping him in a cocoon of nostalgia. Madame Leclerc glanced up from her work, and for a split second, her face remained impassive. Then her eyes widened in recognition, and her hands froze mid-need. "Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Mark felt a lump rise in his throat as he nodded, unable to find the words. Madame Leclerc set down the dough and hurried around the counter, her arms opening wide. Without hesitation, she pulled him into a tight embrace, her frail frame shaking slightly as tears welled up in her eyes. "It's really you," she murmured, holding him at arm's length to get a better look. "You've grown so much, but I'd know those eyes anywhere." The floodgates opened after that. Word spread faster than wildfire in the small village. Within minutes, curious neighbors began gathering outside the bakery, peering in through the windows and whispering excitedly. Soon, the door swung open, and familiar faces poured in. Old friends, former teachers, and even distant relatives he hadn't seen in years. Each one brought a memory, a story, a piece of his past that he thought he'd forgotten. There was Monsieur Dubois, his old math teacher, who teased him about the time he fell asleep during class because he'd stayed up too late playing hide and seek, and Sophie, the girl he used to have a crush on, who shyly admitted she'd kept the handmade bracelet he gave her all those years ago. Even the gruff butcher, who once scolded him for sneaking sausages, clapped him on the back and said, "Welcome home, soldier." The bakery quickly became too crowded, so the group spilled out onto the street, forming a lively procession that drew more and more villagers. Children tugged at Mark's sleeves, asking if he fought in battles or saved lives. Older folks shared stories of how proud they were when they heard he'd joined the military. Laughter and chatter filled the air, creating a symphony of connection that made Mark's chest swell with emotion. Amidst the chaos, Mark noticed his parents standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. Their faces were lined with age, but their eyes shone with pride and love. For a moment, he felt a pang of guilt, for leaving, for staying away. But it was quickly replaced by gratitude. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a reminder of where he came from and who he was beneath the uniform. As he embraced his parents and listened to the voices of the people who had shaped him, he realized something profound. No matter how far he traveled or how much he changed, this place and these people would always be his anchor. By the time the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the village, Mark felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of unresolved feelings and unanswered questions had lifted, replaced by a sense of belonging that only home could provide. Though the soldiers' official mission was still underway, Mark knew this unexpected detour had already changed everything. For him, and perhaps for the entire village. Over the next few days, the soldiers became an inseparable part of the village's rhythm. What had started as a formal and slightly distant relationship transformed into something much deeper, a bond built on shared laughter, hard work, and genuine connection. The villagers, who were initially curious but reserved, now treated the soldiers like long-lost family members returning home. And for the soldiers, especially Lieutenant Mark Dupont, this newfound camaraderie felt like a balm to their weary souls. Every morning, after completing their training exercises, the soldiers would make their way into the heart of the village. They didn't come empty-handed. They brought energy, enthusiasm, and a willingness to help wherever it was needed. Farmers welcomed them into their fields, teaching them how to harvest crops without damaging the soil. "You're holding that pitchfork all wrong," one farmer joked, slapping a young recruit on the back. The soldier laughed nervously but quickly caught on, earning approving nods from the seasoned hands around him. By the end of the day, his arms ached, but so did his cheeks from smiling too much. The children of the village adored the soldiers, trailing behind them like ducklings following their mother. Soccer matches became a daily ritual in the open field near the schoolhouse. The soldiers played with gusto, diving dramatically for goals and pretending to be winded after every sprint, much to the delight of the kids. Even Mark joined in, rolling up his sleeves and showing off moves he claimed he'd learned during his military training. Lieutenant DuPont is unstoppable. The children cheered, giggling as he spun around to dodge an imaginary opponent. For those brief hours, there were no ranks or uniforms, just people playing together under the wide blue sky. In the evenings, the soldiers gathered with the villagers for meals that stretched late into the night. Tables groaned under the weight of hearty stews, freshly baked bread, and plates piled high with roasted vegetables. Conversations flowed freely, weaving stories of the past with dreams of the future. One elderly woman recounted tales of her youth, while a young soldier shyly shared his aspirations of becoming a teacher once his service ended. These exchanges created invisible threads that tied everyone closer together. For Mark, these moments were particularly meaningful. He found himself straddling two worlds, the disciplined life of a soldier and the carefree days of his childhood. During the day, he commanded respect as Lieutenant DuPont, leading his team with authority and precision. But in the evenings, he shed the title, becoming simply Mark again, the boy who used to climb trees and chase frogs in the stream. This duality wasn't confusing. Instead, it felt grounding. It reminded him that beneath the uniform, he was still human, still connected to the roots that had nurtured him. The villagers, too, began to see the soldiers in a new light. They weren't just representatives of a distant institution. They were individuals with hopes, fears, and stories of their own. A young recruit named Pierre spoke fondly of his little sister back home, pulling out a crumpled photograph to show anyone who would listen. Another soldier, Antoine, revealed his love for painting, sketching quick portraits of villagers who posed eagerly for him. These small glimpses into their lives made them relatable, turning strangers into friends. One evening, as the stars twinkled above and the air grew cool, Mark sat by the fire with a group of elders. They spoke about how the village had changed over the years, the challenges it faced, the traditions it cherished, and the memories it held dear. Mark listened intently, realizing how much he had missed while he was away. Yet, instead of feeling regret, he felt gratitude for the chance to reconnect, to bridge the gap between his past and present. By the time the soldiers retired to their barracks each night, exhausted but content, the village buzzed with warmth and goodwill. The initial curiosity had blossomed into mutual admiration, proving that despite differences in background or purpose, people could find common ground when given the opportunity. For both the villagers and the soldiers, this unexpected chapter was shaping up to be something extraordinary, a reminder of the power of human connection and the joy of belonging. As the soldiers settled into the rhythm of village life, Lieutenant Mark DuPont couldn't shake off a growing concern that had been tugging at his thoughts. During one of his walks through the town, he noticed something that struck him deeply: the community center. Once the heart of the village, it now stood neglected and worn, its paint peeling, windows cracked, and roof sagging under years of disrepair. It was a stark contrast to the lively spirit of the villagers who had welcomed him and his team with such warmth. Mark remembered the countless events that used to take place there: festivals, weddings, meetings, and even school plays. The building wasn't just a structure, it was a symbol of unity, a place where people gathered to celebrate, share stories, and support one another. But now it sat abandoned, a silent reminder of challenges the village couldn't overcome on its own. When Mark asked about it, an elderly man named Monsieur Renault explained that the repairs were too costly for the small community. "We've tried raising funds," he said with a sigh, "but times are tough, and everyone's doing what they can just to get by." That night, as Mark lay in his cot at the barracks, he couldn't stop thinking about the community center. He knew the soldiers' visit would eventually come to an end, but he wanted to leave behind something meaningful, a gesture that would show the villagers how much their kindness meant to him and his team. Quietly, he got up and walked over to where a few of his comrades were sitting around a lantern, sharing jokes and stories. "Gentlemen," Mark began hesitantly, "I have an idea." His tone caught their attention immediately. He explained what he'd seen, the dilapidated community center, and proposed a plan, using their skills, tools, and spare time to repair it before they left. At first, there was silence. Then, Antoine, the soldier who loved painting, grinned. "You mean turn this place into our little mission?" he asked. One by one, the others nodded enthusiastically. They didn't need much convincing. They all felt the same way Mark did. This village had given them more than they expected, and they wanted to give something back. The next morning, the soldiers sprang into action. They pooled their resources, gathering materials from nearby towns and repurposing whatever they could find. Some of them reached out to contacts in the military supply chain, securing extra plywood, nails, and paint. Others scouted the area for unused tools or borrowed them from helpful villagers. By the time Saturday rolled around, everything was ready. The only thing missing was secrecy. They decided to keep their plan hidden until the big reveal. On Friday evening, Mark approached the mayor and asked if the soldiers could use the community center for a training exercise early the next morning. Suspicious but trusting, the mayor agreed. What neither he nor the rest of the village realized was that this exercise would be unlike anything they'd ever seen. Saturday dawned bright and clear, and the soldiers arrived at the community center before sunrise. Armed with hammers, brushes, and determination, they got to work. Word quickly spread among the villagers, who came out to investigate the commotion. At first, they simply watched in amazement as the soldiers tore down broken boards, patched holes in the walls, and scrubbed away years of grime. But soon, they couldn't resist joining in. Elderly men offered advice on carpentry techniques, women brought food and drinks to keep everyone energized, and children ran around handing out tools like eager assistants. By midday, the scene resembled a festival rather than a construction site. Laughter echoed through the air as soldiers and villagers worked side by side, their combined efforts breathing new life into the old building. Mark found himself working alongside Madame Leclerc, who insisted on helping despite her age. "You may be strong, Lieutenant," she teased, "but I'm not done yet." Her words drew chuckles from those nearby, and the mood remained light and joyful. As the sun began to set, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The once dilapidated community center now stood sturdy and inviting, its freshly painted walls glowing softly in the golden light. A cheer erupted from the crowd as Mark stepped back to admire their handiwork. For the soldiers, it wasn't just about fixing a building. It was about restoring hope, pride, and connection. And for the villagers, it was proof that even strangers could become family when hearts opened wide enough to let each other in. The day of the community center's transformation began with a flurry of activity that turned the quiet village into a hive of energy and excitement. Soldiers and villagers worked side by side, their laughter mingling with the rhythmic sounds of hammers striking nails and saws slicing through wood. It was chaotic yet harmonious, like an orchestra where everyone played their part without needing sheet music. Lieutenant Marc Dupont took charge of organizing the effort, his military training shining through as he delegated tasks efficiently. Antoine, the artistic soldier, led a team painting the walls in cheerful shades of blue and yellow. "This color will remind them of sunshine," he said, dipping his brush into a can with a grin. Nearby, Pierre carefully sanded down old wooden beams under the watchful eye of Monsieur Renault, who offered tips on carpentry. "You're doing great, son," the elderly man said approvingly, patting Pierre on the shoulder. The young soldier beamed at the praise, clearly proud to contribute something meaningful. Children darted around, eager to help in any way they could. Some carried buckets of water for cleaning, while others handed out tools or held planks steady for the adults. One little girl named Claire insisted on being Mark's assistant, trailing him everywhere with wide eyes full of admiration. "What's next, Lieutenant?" she asked excitedly after each completed task. Mark chuckled, giving her small but important jobs like fetching screws or holding tape measures. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and soon even the most tired workers found themselves smiling. As the hours passed, the bond between the soldiers and villagers grew stronger. Stories flowed freely during breaks, shared over slices of bread slathered with butter and jam brought by the women. A farmer named Jean recounted how he once tried to teach Mark how to milk a cow when he was a boy, only for Mark to spill half the bucket. Everyone roared with laughter, including Mark, who admitted sheepishly, "I think I'm better suited for fixing roofs than farming." Madame Leclerc, ever the guiding force, made sure no one went hungry. She set up a makeshift kitchen near the site, serving hearty bowls of stew and mugs of hot tea. "Eat, eat," she urged, shooing away anyone who tried to refuse. "You'll need your strength if you want to finish this masterpiece." Her words sparked another round of chuckles, but no one argued. The food was delicious, and the warmth of her care added fuel to their efforts. By late afternoon, the progress was undeniable. The sagging roof had been replaced with sturdy new beams, the broken windows swapped out for clear glass panes, and the faded exterior transformed into a vibrant canvas of color. Inside, the musty smell of neglect had given way to the fresh scent of polished wood and paint. Every corner of the building seemed to hum with renewed life, as though it were thanking everyone for bringing it back from the brink of ruin. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the village, the final touches were added. Someone strung up strings of fairy lights along the eaves, while another group arranged chairs and tables inside. The atmosphere shifted from focused labor to celebratory anticipation. People stood back, admiring what they had accomplished together. For the soldiers, it wasn't just about completing a project. It was about leaving behind something tangible, a reminder of the connection they had forged with these people. When everything was finally done, Mark called everyone to gather in front of the newly restored community center. He looked around at the sea of faces, smiling, tired, but undeniably happy, and felt a lump rise in his throat. "This isn't just our work," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It belongs to all of you, to the heart of this village." His words were met with applause, cheers, and even a few tears. In that moment, it was clear. The soldiers hadn't just repaired a building. They had strengthened the spirit of an entire community. And as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, the sense of accomplishment lingered, glowing brighter than any lantern. As twilight settled over the village, the newly restored community center stood as a beacon of hope and unity. Its freshly painted walls glowed softly in the fading light, and the strings of fairy lights twinkled like stars against the evening sky. The air buzzed with excitement as villagers and soldiers gathered inside for a celebration that would long be remembered. Tables were set up in the main hall, laden with dishes prepared by the women of the village. There were steaming pots of hearty stew, platters of roasted meats, baskets overflowing with crusty bread, and desserts so sweet they made mouths water just looking at them. The aroma of spices and baked goods filled the room, mingling with the sound of laughter and chatter. Children darted between tables, their giggles echoing off the newly repaired walls, while elders sat together, reminiscing about days gone by. The evening began with speeches, starting with the mayor, who thanked the soldiers for their incredible gift to the village. "This place was once our pride, and now it is again," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But more than bricks and paint, you've given us something far greater, a reminder of what we can achieve when we come together." His words drew loud applause, and several villagers wiped away tears. Then it was Mark's turn to speak. He stepped forward, his uniform crisp but his expression humble. For a moment, he simply looked around the room, taking in the faces of the people he had grown up with and the comrades who had become like family. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but full of feeling. "When I came back here, I thought I was searching for something from my past," he began. "But what I found was much more valuable. A reminder of who I am and where I come from." He paused, glancing at Madame Leclerc, who gave him an encouraging nod. "This building isn't just wood and nails," he continued. "It's a symbol of connection, of love, and of resilience, and it wouldn't have been possible without all of you, soldiers and villagers alike. You reminded me that no matter how far we go or how much we change, there's always a place where we belong." His speech ended with a standing ovation, and many in the crowd clapped until their hands stung. Someone started playing an accordion, its lively tune filling the room and prompting people to push aside chairs and clear space for dancing. Soon, the floor was alive with movement. Soldiers twirled villagers in traditional dances, their boots thumping rhythmically against the wooden floor. Even Mark joined in, laughing as he spun Sophie, the girl he'd once crushed on, around in circles. Her cheeks flushed pink, and she teased him, saying, "You're not half bad at this, Lieutenant." As the night wore on, stories flowed freely. Elderly men recounted tales of their youth, while soldiers shared funny anecdotes from their training days. Antoine unveiled his artistic side once more, sketching quick portraits of anyone willing to pose. Each drawing earned delighted gasps and applause, adding another layer of joy to the festivities. One little boy named Lucas proudly held up his portrait, declaring, "I'm going to hang this above my bed forever." Outside, the cool night air carried the sounds of music and merriment. Some villagers lit a bonfire in the courtyard, its flames casting flickering shadows on the walls of the community center. Around it, people gathered to roast marshmallows and share quiet conversations. A group of children played hide-and-seek nearby, their laughter ringing out like bells. It was impossible not to feel the magic of the moment, the kind that happens when hearts are open and barriers dissolve. By midnight, the party showed no signs of slowing down. Songs erupted spontaneously, led by villagers strumming guitars and tambourines. Soldiers joined in, their voices blending with those of the townsfolk in imperfect but heartfelt harmony. Someone suggested a toast, raising a glass high. To friendship, they cheered. To home, others echoed. Glasses clinked, sealing the bond that had formed over the past week. For Mark, the night felt surreal yet deeply fulfilling. As he stood outside under the starlit sky, watching the scene unfold, he realized this wasn't just a farewell. It was a new beginning. The soldiers had arrived as outsiders, but were leaving as cherished members of the community. And though their visit was temporary, the impact they'd made would last a lifetime. As the fire crackled softly and the music drifted through the air, one thing was certain. This night would live in the memories of everyone present, not just as a celebration of a rebuilt building, but as a testament to the power of human connection and the beauty of coming together. The day of departure arrived too soon, cloaking the village in a bittersweet atmosphere. The soldiers packed their gear and prepared to leave, their movements slower than usual, as if they were trying to stretch out every last moment in the place that had come to feel like home. For Lieutenant Marc Dupont and his comrades, saying goodbye wasn't going to be easy, not after everything they had shared with the villagers. Early that morning, before the convoy was scheduled to roll out, the entire village gathered near the community center. It was as though no one wanted to miss the chance to bid farewell. Children clutched handmade cards and drawings for the soldiers, while adults carried baskets filled with bread, cheese, and other local delicacies as tokens of gratitude. Even Madame Leclerc stood at the front of the crowd, her hands clasped tightly over her chest, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Mark stepped forward first, his heart heavy but full. He shook hands with the mayor, exchanged hugs with old friends, and knelt down to accept a bouquet of wildflowers from little Claire, his assistant from the repair project. "Thank you for helping us fix the center, Lieutenant," she said shyly, her voice trembling. Mark smiled warmly, ruffling her hair. "No, thank you for reminding me what it means to belong here," he replied softly. One by one, the soldiers followed suit, each receiving heartfelt goodbyes. Antoine handed out the portraits he'd drawn during the celebration, signing them with personal messages. Pierre hugged the farmer who had taught him how to hold a pitchfork properly, promising to write letters about life back at the barracks. The bond between the villagers and the soldiers felt unbreakable now, forged through laughter, hard work, and countless shared moments. As the trucks lined up along the cobblestone street, ready to pull away, Mark took a final look around. His gaze lingered on the community center, its freshly painted walls gleaming in the morning sunlight. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and unity. More importantly, it represented the connection that had been reignited between him and the people of his childhood home. Standing beside his parents, Mark felt a profound sense of peace. The weight of unresolved feelings and unanswered questions had lifted, replaced by love and understanding. His mother hugged him tightly, whispering, "Come back soon, my boy." His father clapped him on the shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. Mark nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He knew this wasn't goodbye forever. It was simply until next time. The convoy began to move, engines rumbling softly as the soldiers waved from their seats. The villagers cheered and waved back, some running alongside the vehicles for a few steps before falling behind. Children shouted farewells, their voices carrying on the breeze, while elders raised their hands in silent blessings. The scene was both joyful and heartbreaking, a testament to the deep bonds that had formed in such a short time. For the villagers, the soldiers' departure left an emptiness, but also a renewed sense of purpose. The restored community center became a hub of activity once again, hosting gatherings, workshops, and celebrations. Every event held within its walls carried echoes of the soldiers' kindness and dedication. Photos taken during the renovation hung proudly inside, serving as reminders of the extraordinary week when strangers became family. As for Mark and his fellow soldiers, the memory of the village stayed with them long after they returned to their duties. They often spoke of the warmth and generosity they had experienced there, finding strength in those recollections during tough times. Letters flowed back and forth between the soldiers and the villagers, bridging the distance and keeping the connection alive. In the end, the soldiers hadn't just repaired a building. They had mended hearts, rekindled old ties, and created new ones. Their visit proved that even in a world divided by roles and responsibilities, human connection could transcend barriers. And for the villagers, the experience reminded them that sometimes unexpected visitors bring gifts far greater than anyone could have imagined. The gift of belonging, of healing, and of love. Though the soldiers drove farther and farther away, their legacy remained etched into the soul of the village, a reminder that even brief encounters can leave lasting imprints. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden light over the hills, the villagers turned toward the future with hope in their hearts. After all, they now knew that no matter where life took them, they would always carry a piece of each other with them.